Maybe you've got to cut a 2-inch slot in the end of the board and have the piece drop out, and all you've got is a Skilsaw. You don't have a jigsaw or a drill motor for terminating the slot.
I don't want you to think I'm saying that it's a good idea to do any of these, especially some of them that are just egregious. But I want you to know that sometimes you're going to find yourself in a position where you've just got to be able to do something non-typical and perhaps that you would get in trouble for in an ordinary circumstance. Just like driving on icy roads. Nobody likes to do it, but sometimes we all have to do it.
That's a good way to plow a 2-inch slot in a board. It's also a good way to cut off your hand. If you think about trying any of these things, I want you to go to our introductory circular saw pro tip introduction watch yourself video that we posted years ago before you pick one of these things up and try something like what I'm just about to show you. Maybe you're cutting hip rafters, valley rafters, hip jacks, and you need to put a bevel on you need to put a cheek cut on a valley jack. You can freehand the bevel. You don't have to change the setting on your table. You cut your pitch, and you start at the heel of the angle, not the toe. And there's your cheek cut. You can do the same thing on a rip. 2 things. Start from the heel of that angle, not from the toe. Because if you start from the toe, there's a tendency for the guard to hang up. And second, you saw me reach around behind that cut. You saw me reach around behind there. Buddy, you better pay attention when you do that, because a kickback that you're not ready for at that moment could shorten up one side of your body. You can do a freehand bevel on a rip, too. Not just a cross cut, not just on an angle, but on a long rip. You turn the board up. Pretty good for framing. No good at all for furniture. Not bad. The next finger chopping trick is called the Polish plane. Maybe you've got to put a let-in brace in. You've got to recess a notch down into the edge of a 2x4 or a 2x4 wall. What you're looking at here is a dinosaur from the past. It's a full cut 2x4. 2x4, not really. This is a chunk of a glue lamb that I've repurposed from another job. But let's just say that you're going to put a little 3.5-inch wide dado notch in the edge of a board. You want to set the depth. Here's a trick for setting the depth. You take the piece that has to go in. There's the depth. Give it a little bit. You define the edges. You run a series of notches. You knock them out. Get rid of most of them. And then to smooth up the bottom, you get a good tight grip and do this. So that was kind of awkward, doing it all the way across at one time. If you do half at a time, you may have a little better luck. So that there's more surface for the saw table to run on. Tight hole. Knock them out. That's breaking out pretty clean. like that. Don't try this unless you can hang on to that saw. This is a pressure-treated 6x6 that's specifically manufactured and pressure-treated around here for pole barns. It's 5 3/4 thick. My little 2 1/4 inch depth of cut on my Mag 77 will not get to the middle, so it makes a more practical, perhaps, or more common application for the Polish plane, just cleaning up the end of a post after you've cut it off, like this. Full depth. Didn't reach through. Probably I can break it off if I drop it. But that gives me a little burr right there that won't let the beam sit down on it nice. So I just take my Polish plane, move the table down so I'm not way up in the air, stay back out of the way. Just like that. As I wind this up, these things are heavy. Now, they're not near as heavy as they used to be. We've done videos on that whole thing. But on these moves, the weight, the mass is keeping you out of trouble. My friend Brady, on the other side of that camera, nearly cut a finger right off with a little cordless saw that weighed almost nothing, because there's nothing to resist the momentum of a kickback, except with these things. I mean, the weight's your friend. I've got a story before we sign off. I was working in Wyoming for Wade Welch, building homes, building a set of trusses on the deck of a nice ranch-style house we were building. And a young man named Milt Blomberg was helping me. Milt was strong and he was smart, and I loved working with Milt. And we were cutting the long tails on the ceiling joist right out to a point, and so the guard was hanging up, causing a problem. So we pinned the guard. You can put a nail in right there, and it keeps the guard up. And then you really better pay attention. And Milt was getting tired of me sort of micromanaging him, and I don't blame him. But after he was finishing the tail cuts, he would let the saw drop right by his leg. It would just swing down, and he'd set it on the ground with the guard pinned up. And I thought, do I want to say anything to him? No, he's a man. I'm not. Well, about 2 minutes later, it was whack! It stopped. And I knew before I looked over what had happened. He had let that drop by his leg, and it hung up on his Levi's, and pulled it right into the front of his thigh, right into his quadricep. Boom! To the table. Now, we had set it to depth, so it was 1.5 inches deep. And Milt was big. And so 1.5 inches into the front of his thigh wasn't as big a deal for him as it would be for me now at 67 years old. And he dropped the saw, and he flopped down on the deck, and he had his hands on his thigh, and he knew he was hurt, and I did too. I said, hold some pressure, I'll go get a bandage. And I went to there was no first aid kit on the job, but I had kids. So I had disposable diapers in the glove box. And I opened the glove box, and I grabbed a diaper, and I went over there, and I took my razor knife. He was holding his hands, and I cut his pants, and he pulled it back, and there was this cut. It was about that long, and it was about that deep, and it was just like that, and there was just a little bit of blood down in the bottom, but you could see the muscle fiber. He was parallel to the muscle. He didn't hit the femoral artery. He didn't hit his bone. So we put the diaper on there, but there was no blood. And I ran him to the hospital. And 2 days later, he was back on the job with a whole bunch of stitches, and he was limping around, and he healed up. But it was a lesson I will never forget. And so when you see people on the job site using a skill saw like it's an extension of their arm, and it is, with teeth, don't make the mistake of thinking that you're going to go home and try that. Ease into it. You've got to always be nervous. It's like a kid on a motorbike. As soon as he decides he knows what he's doing, that's the time he's going to get hurt. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.